Alright, well, we're back again for another update on the Trek Farley EX 9.8, and today we're going to be spending a little bit of time on in the shock area, or at least I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on the shock. I've got a trick up my sleeve. I'm going to see if it works, and it has a lot to do with trying to get a little bit more, adjusting the geo ever so slightly, on this bike to rake out the head angle just a little bit more, make it a little bit more playful, a little bit more stable for three-season trail riding. So stay tuned, and I'm going to show you a couple pieces of hardware that I'm getting into, and then we'll get started with the upgrade. So just another technical point to point out. The Trek Farley EX 9.8 comes with a very good shock. It's the Fox Float Evol, so it's the extra volume can. It's got the markings for Evol that you can't quite make out right up here. But this is a Fox Float Evol shock. It's a reactive, it's Trek's reactive technology, so they partnered with Penske and did a little bit of work on, you can read about it on Trek's website, did a little bit of work with Penske to work on what I believe is a digressive curve, where you get a little bit of different characteristics between the initial stroke and when you get into the mid and deep part of the travel. The dimensions on this shock, the eye to eye, which is this to here, so the eye to eye measurements are 7.25, and the stroke length is 1.875. In metric terms, I'm not going to do the conversion on the fly, but if those numbers don't mean anything to you, good. They shouldn't. This is one of the I guess one of the issues I've got is that this is a proprietary shock size, and so the only thing that you can retrofit this bike with is another Fox reactive or a DRCV, another Trek technology dual rate control valve shock. But the only upgrade I can make to this, other than sending it out to push suspension for some tuning, is they make a Kashima coated version, so this would be considered like the performance level, and they make a factory level one with the gold Kashima coat here. But I looked into all kinds of other solutions, maybe doing a coil, but there are some issues with that. Particularly, you can see a little bit of a concave, the inside part of the what is the seat tube. It's a little bit concave in here, and so what that lets it do is when the suspension compresses, the air can compress down, and it clears the seat tube. So that's one of the things I'm going to be watching out for when I make a quick little mod, or not so quick little mod, but a simple mod that I think is going to help me a little bit with just making the geo a little bit more playful, to be honest with you. So I'll get to that in a minute, and you'll see what I'm talking about. What I'm doing here is I'm going to get in here and I'm going to change the lower bushing on the shock to an offset bushing. So this is a center drilled bushing. When I take out the shock, I'll show you what that looks like. Moving to an offset bushing, and I'll show you what that looks like, from this company right here. And it was just too easy for me to just take a sticker out of the bag, stick it on here, so I wouldn't have to put a link in the video. So here we go, and this is the product itself, and the offset part isn't it? It's the fact that the hole is not center drilled. So this is the Trek that I've got uses 8mm hardware, and that hole there is drilled off center. The effect that will have is once we've got, in the proper mounting of this, once this is mounted in the eyelet like this, and the center faces inward, it has the effect of dropping ever so slightly the bottom bracket and slacking out the head angle, again, ever so slightly. When you match it, that is when you put one up here as well in the same position facing inward, you get the effect on both ends. And so if you use one, you get, for this particular hardware, you get half a degree of benefit to the head angle, and by that I mean slacker. And then you stick one on the top, and you get a full degree. So they're additive. So I'm gonna take out the shock, and we'll take a profile here. You can see this is set up. So the hardware here is set up so that actually the shock has a shorter sort of gap here than on this side, hence why this one is set up this way. This is here because it's a replacement bushing if I wanted to pop out the bushing in there. But the thing is, this is a fairly new shock and the bushing isn't worn, so I'm going to save the one that was included in the kit until I need it. Okay. Alright, so most of my videos to date have been a little ghetto, so we'll just continue that trend. What I wanted to show here, I've spent about a half an hour just doing some of the shock hardware work. The bulk of it was taking the shock off. Taking the shock off wasn't the problem. Okay, and I'm only going to be doing work on in terms of the offset hardware. Only going to be doing work on the lower eyelet, not the top, and that's because there's a proprietary mount here that doesn't allow me to do an offset. I don't have the clearances to do that. I have to check in with offset bushings, the guys over there in the UK, whether they have a solution for this. But what they did was they sent me hardware for an upper and a lower. I'm not sure whether they knew about, and I did specify that I was doing this for a Farley EX 9.8, but to be honest with you, it's a fairly new model, and so they might not have had some experience with it. But they do have experience with a bunch of other bikes, and I'll save another set of offset bushings for another video, and I'm excited to be doing that one as well. But this is a video about doing it here, and what I've done is, let me see if I can explain a couple of things. So on the lower eyelet, on Fox, I've already actually installed the lower bushing that came with the offset bushing kit. You can see it pressed in there, and the way that I did that was just required a little bit of patience. This is a bushing tool, and it's set up in a way that it's cupped on one end and a larger diameter on the other. And the way that you do this, first of all, there are a couple of good tutorials online on YouTube that you can watch. I learned from them and then applied it to my own situation here. But this is what you use to, you can use it to remove the bushings, and you can also use it to set them. And so that's exactly what I did, and I used a 4mm wrench and a socket on the other end. So that one went in here to drive one end, the Allen went on the other side. Believe me when I say I do a terrible job at showing you how this works, and there are a couple of videos online that can do a much better job. Hey, and if I learned how to do it from watching YouTube, I'm telling you, anyone can, and I mean that sincerely. These are the pieces that came out. So in the lower eyelet of the shock, I had the Fox. People know these. You know, you've seen these before if you've ever taken your shock apart. These are the two half pieces that make up the bushing, and they're picked at right now, but they make up the bushing that goes in this eyelet, and it goes in like a clam, like halves. So it goes in one side, and this guy goes in the other side, and together they made up just like that. And there's a little rubber ring that goes I'm not going to even try, but there's a little rubber rings that go right on the outside of these, and they butt up against the hardware, which are these pieces here. Here's one. And this is the other side of it. And through these, this is the piece that goes through the eyelet that mounts to the shock, and life is good. So this is the piece that is center drilled. I don't know if you can see that. Center drilled. And what we're going to end up doing is we're replacing this with this guy, which is offset drilled. Okay? That's it. So let me get to fitting it on the shock and fitting it on the bike. And visually, you should notice almost no difference. And it makes a little tweak in the geometry department, but I have a feeling I'll notice it because you tend to notice a lot of things on a fat bike because everything is exaggerated. All right, more to come. All right, well, this took almost no time at all. The trick is getting it dead set center, and because it's a tight fit, and it should be, it took, I spent a little bit more time making sure that the in terms of, I guess you call it in terms of timing on an engine, you know, bottom dead center, top dead center. I was trying to get that piece centered. And then the next piece is because this is an offset, it's offset in another way because the bushing is offset to one side. I needed to do a series of tap, tap, tap with the rubber mallet, and then make sure that this was just so. So the way it is just so is you slide this on, and the clearance there is, it is right on. I see a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a lip there. And the thing is, when I mount the other side, and take a look, let me see here, it's flush. So I'm going to do a test fit here and see what's going on, and we should be good to go. That is looking good. All right, so shock's back on the bike. It I don't know, it didn't take much. It's really patience with alignment. This is an offset, like I had shown earlier. It's offset more to one side than the other, so just kind of working it in, getting the torque set. I got a Park torque wrench that gets me most of the way there. It goes up, mine goes up to 15 Newton meters. The top bolts require 17 Newton meters, so I gave it a little bit more. I snugged it up a little bit more than the max that I have set on the torque wrench. It's not scientific at all. Bottom one was fine. I had that one set to, I forget, I think it was 10 Newton meters, and that one set just fine. So we're good there. So it's the lower shock hardware. I've got a cycle. I'm going to take it off the stand. I'm going to cycle the shock to see if there are any clearance issues with the shock empty. And then I'm going to do the inflate procedure where every 50 pounds of pressure you cycle the shock to get the positive and negative pressure sorted. I think that's the same. That's the protocol on my Fox Float X2s. I don't actually know if it's the same on the straight up float, but I think it is. So let me give it a go and take it for a ride and see what's up. So we can run the bike through its stroke. Do that right here. And let's see what kind of clearance we've got. Doing this with one hand. That's all the way through and it's bottomed out. And you'll see that oftentimes you can't just measure the shock shaft length. You have to use the stroke. So the bottom out ring, I don't know if you can see, it's not all the way at the bottom of the stroke of the shaft, but that is the stroke length. And so that's the important part that you need to watch for. So that's actually bottom out, not when the ring comes off the shock shaft. So that's just a little aside, but I'm running it through the suspension travel, the shock is empty, and I don't see any clearance issues with this new, and I didn't expect any. Frankly, it's minor, but because how close it is at rest, in the static position, I thought I should just double check. So yeah, there we go. No issues. All right, so I'm going to attempt to capture the sound of the positive and negative air pressure equalizing. I'm on my second cycle. I inflate in 50-pound increments, and then you balance, and then you run the shock through 25% of its stroke, and let me let the sound of the passing cars pass, and then I'm going to just push down through 25% of the stroke, and let's see if we can hear. There it is. So unfortunately I've got the shock hanging, it's attached and it's hanging down, and so that's probably what you're hearing. Let me try it again. Sorry for the awesome camera work here. Here we go. Yeah. Alright, so it's not coming out, but here's the deal. What you feel as you cycle through the stroke is you feel a little bit of give. And what's going on is the negative and positive air pressure chambers are equalizing. You're letting the air pressure seep through to the negative side so that the shock behaves the way that it's supposed to when you're riding it. I'll be doing this a few more times because I run my shock pressure pretty high just because of my weight and the leverage ratio on this bike. But who are we kidding? And so it takes a little while to get there. Anyway, what you feel is a little bit of give. You hear a little psh, just a couple of those, but you're supposed to cycle it, I think, between 5 and 10 times through 25% of its strokes. It takes a little while to get the settings right, but it's worth it because then then the shock behaves the way it's supposed to. So I'm not one for superlatives, but I will tell you that my experience on this thing right now, just having made a half a degree of adjustment in the head angle and the bottom bracket drop, noticeable. I can be fussy about some of these things, so I'll admit now that your experience, I will be quick to note that your experience may vary. I can say that for the expense, which is minor, it's just a bunch of hardware, but it's a bunch of hardware, just a bunch of hardware in the right places. I can tell you that my very first impressions of this, which is just riding around my yard and just spinning the pedals, I can tell a difference, and it's for the better. It's, fat bikes, full suspension fat bikes are getting closer and closer to being like regular bikes. And if you like what you saw and you want to see more, or you want to see something else, or you have any questions, leave a comment. And let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see. I got a couple more updates coming on some other things, but always nice to hear from you. Thanks.